Welcome back to Paris Underground Radio's The Heart of You. My name is Annette Deleu, and you are listening to episode 13, The Crumbling Wall. In today's episode, we are going to discuss some of the more challenging aspects of a spiritual awakening. So if you have been going through some rough times, some big changes in your life, this is the episode for you. If you are not familiar with all of the meanings of each tarot card, this may come as a bit of a surprise. Most people would think that the Death card or the Devil card would be the so-called scary cards, when in fact they are absolutely not. The Devil card represents duality. It also represents possible addictions or things that keep you stuck in a particular energy. And the Death card simply means something that is changing, something that you are coming out of, the end of a situation. If you are a tarot reader, though, most of the time, the most challenging card would actually be the Tower. If you watch tarot readings on YouTube or anywhere else, most of the time you will find readers will say, oh, if you get the Tower card, it means very big changes. Now, these changes are not all necessarily bad. Some changes in life are really positive changes. And quite frankly, from my perspective, it doesn't matter if the change is challenging or not, it's all going to be positive in the end. So for me, I feel like the Tower card is a really amazing card. It very much tells you that you are moving into a different energy, a different life even. In order for those changes to happen, there are a lot of things that need to shift, change, and disappear from your life in order for that to come to fruition. There are many ways that can happen. If we are following our intuition and we know exactly how our life path is supposed to go, and we're going with the flow and we're using our spiritual tools, then these changes can be very, very smooth. Even if they are challenging, the ups and downs are not going to be as extreme. If you are in resistance, if you are not wanting these changes to happen, if you don't like change, if you are really focused on one particular outcome, that change is going to be much more difficult for you. There are going to be a lot more little pushes from the universe to get you and nudge you into your right life path. This is something that I experienced firsthand during my spiritual awakening. And I can tell you this, when I first started going through my spiritual awakening, I didn't know that that's what it was. I just thought that things in my life were falling apart. I thought that I was losing my mind. Quite frankly, I thought that there was something seriously wrong with me. I didn't realize what was actually happening. In hindsight now, I can look back on it and say, okay, yeah, it was because I didn't understand what was happening. I was in resistance to the change that was supposed to be happening for me. And because I was in that resistance, the universe had to get louder and louder with the communication about what I needed to change. If you are listening to this podcast, then you already are one step ahead of where I was when I first started my awakening, because I didn't even know what to look for. And if you are here, that means that you are already doing the work, that you are already doing the research and figuring out the best way to move through this awakening process. If you have not been through this energy yet, I want to put this little caveat here that I don't want this episode to scare you. I don't want you to think that all of these things are going to happen to you when you go through your spiritual awakening. Everybody's journey is completely for that individual person, and every person's journey is unique. The situations you may need to go through in order to shed and cleanse and transmute old energy might be completely different from the person next to you or a friend that is going through their spiritual awakening. But there are a lot of similarities and solidarity that you can move into with other people who are also going through this. This is why when we come together and start discussing the things that we are going through in regards to spiritual awakening, it is really important to have that community, because if you feel 100% alone on this journey, it can make this transition all the more difficult. I'm going to back up a little bit. When you talk about the spiritual awakening, it can happen in various different ways, and I have mentioned this in previous podcasts. Sometimes somebody can have a spontaneous spiritual awakening via a near-death experience or something traumatic like that. Sometimes it can be through a twin flame connection, which that was my case. It can be through overcoming an addiction or coming across a person who has just changed your life in a completely significant manner. It doesn't matter what event or situation sparks your spiritual awakening. What is important is the fact that you are going to be going through very similar phases and trials in order to continue to move through and transmute the old energy. And ultimately, to move into unconditional love, to transcend duality, and to move forward in a collective energy that is harmonious and full of beauty and peace. And I have to say that that is the part that most people know about. They know that when you go through an awakening, that the ultimate reward or goal, if you will, is to reach that enlightenment and that beautiful place of being at peace always. And people think that, oh, once I'm enlightened, that's going to happen. Well, that is true. But in order to get there, there is a lot that needs to happen. And not all of it is just about sitting on your meditation cushion and being at one with the universe. A lot of it has to do with big, huge changes in your life. So if you are reaching that point of awakening and you now see the beauty and the synchronicity of the universe, the things in your life that you have currently may not align with that peace, that love, that forgiveness, that compassion. And the more work you do in your ascension process, the more these things will become much more evident. Because as we discussed before, like energy attracts like. If you think about it in terms of magnets, you are going to be in the same frequency of what you are attracting. If you are moving frequencies and if you are doing it rapidly, the frequency that you used to be in no longer resonates with you and no longer fits the way that your life is now going. So in order for you to be matched up with those beautiful things in the energetic field that you are creating, the old things in your life need to fall away. And that may be really uncomfortable. It may be really sad because you really love some of these things, some of these people, some of these experiences, and you don't necessarily want to give those up. And that's where that pain and that resistance can start to come in. What can this look like in real life? Well, it can look like losing friends. During my spiritual awakening, I actually did lose quite a few friends. And it had nothing to do with the fact that they didn't approve of what I was now doing, or because quite frankly, I actually didn't really talk about this with anyone that I didn't feel would understand what I was going through. So a lot of the people that I kept this from didn't even know that I was going through a spiritual awakening. But once I started actually becoming more confident in what was happening, I realized that the people that were a bit more toxic, or the people that were not serving my highest good, and I was no longer serving a purpose in their life, they just needed to go and have their own other experiences. Was it difficult losing the amount of friends that I did? Yes, of course it was. But I did understand eventually why it needed to happen. And the really amazing part about it is that once those friends were gone, the universe absolutely sent me the most aligned and beautiful friends that would actually take that place or fill that void of the community that I had lost. Another area of life that this can have an effect is on your career or your job. You might have had a job for many, many years, and now all of a sudden you can't handle the people that are around you. The energy is just super, super harsh. The things that you used to love about the job maybe are not so great anymore. And the one thing that the universe will do is, like I said, it will turn up the volume on those challenges if you are not listening and leaving the situation. When I was talking about friendships sort of falling apart or leaving your life, those are a little bit easier because you can just sort of not call each other, or, it just sort of falls away. With a job, it takes a little bit more effort to make a decision to leave a job. It also takes a lot more courage because we all get a little uncertain when we don't have an income coming in, or if we don't have another job lined up. What happens is you will start to notice that the things in the job become much more toxic, or you will start to notice things are almost working against you. Maybe your boss is saying that you're not doing a great job anymore, or maybe there are other things that are happening within the organization. So maybe there's a huge amount of layoffs, and you end up being one of those people that are laid off. This is something that absolutely happened to me. I ended up getting fired from a job, which I had never been fired before in my entire life. And one of the reasons they cited for firing me was that I was reading Harry Potter at lunch, and I wasn't being a team player and going out to lunch with the whole team every single day. It was a completely ridiculous reason, and they cited other ridiculous reasons as well. But this was simply the universe's way of pushing me into starting my own business, which is what I ended up doing back in 2005. Now, this was way before I started my spiritual awakening. This was probably a good 6 or 7 years before all of that started. But when I can look back on all of the things that have passed, I can see how everything just was stacking up and getting me set up and prepared for what I am doing right now in this moment. We will be right back with the Heart of You after a word from our sponsors. Welcome back to the Heart of You on Paris Underground Radio. Another challenging thing can be loss of romantic relationships, divorces, things like that. It can simply be that this person has served the purpose in your life and vice versa, or that you have had karma in the past that you needed to work out together and it is now finished. Or this person might actually have agreed to help you and push you along your spiritual journey. And in order to do that, they need to end the relationship. Whether it is that you are the one that ends the relationship or the other person is, it doesn't matter. It still hurts, and it's still hard, and it's still just something that is always life-changing. I want to tell you right now that when this happens during a spiritual awakening, it can be even harder because as you are going through this process, your emotions are on high alert. Your emotions are raw and really sensitive to absolutely everything. So it might feel like it's the end of the world when somebody is ending a relationship, or you lose that job, or you lose that group of friends. This could feel really, really rough. And I understand what it is that you're going through if you are, in fact, going through this right now. If you are, I encourage you to reach out. I encourage you to contact somebody, whether it's me or whether it's somebody else in the spiritual community who can help you get through this process. If you have somebody that you can talk to about this entire event, which for me lasted years, it lasted at least 4 to 5 years of constant change, constant changes, and it was not easy. It was absolutely not easy. If you have somebody you can reach out to, please do. I was super grateful that I had my sister. My sister was also going through her spiritual awakening, and she actually has been going through hers much longer than I have. And having her as a sounding board to be able to talk to about what was happening and what I was experiencing was invaluable. Not only can these changes be enormous, like relationships and jobs, and also for me, moving to Paris was a really big part of that nudge. I needed to get out of the energy of Chicago, which is where I was living. It's not that it was a bad energy, it's just that my energy was no longer resonating with that particular location. And my guidance was telling me that my sole purpose and what I needed to do was no longer in the United States, and that I needed to come to France to do this. And this was something that I had already known was going to happen anyway, because as I had mentioned before, I had wanted to move to France since I was 18. So if you want to think about it in terms of these changes were almost already semi-programmed into what I was supposed to be doing from a very early age. Now that we've talked about some of the larger life changes you can go through in a spiritual awakening, let's talk about some of the smaller ways in which it can affect your life. For me, I absolutely love music. I have a huge range of musical tastes. And one of my favorite things to do when I had a car was to go on road trips and blast music and sing at the top of my lungs. It was a really great joy for me. During my spiritual awakening, it was incredibly difficult for me to listen to a lot of music. And part of that was because I would get so incredibly emotional about it. When you really start tapping into the love of the universe, it is so big. It is so big and so overwhelming, and it fills your heart and your head and every ounce of your body, and you just almost can't handle it. The only way I can describe it is that if you see, I don't know, like a cat video or a puppy video, and the cuteness is just too much to handle, and you're just like, I can't handle the cuteness, I can't. Like, that is essentially what it's like, but multiply that times 50. That is what it feels like when you're feeling that much love. And music is a direct conduit to the divine, to the universe. It is so connected into the vibration of joy and who you are in this world. And of course, it does depend on the type of music you're listening to, but I would say a majority of music is really in that space of love. Even if the song is about something that is challenging, it's something you can relate to. It's something you can connect to. And when you are listening to something and you are going through purging all of these older things, these older belief systems and all of these things in your life, it's going to hit you hard. I had to stop listening to most music for a really long time. I would say probably for a good year and a half. It's not that I stopped listening to music altogether. I would listen occasionally, but for the most part, it was if I was by myself. If I was with other people, it was really hard to not be completely emotional when I would hear a song on the radio or wherever it was. Another really big sensitivity I had was to television. I stopped watching the news. That is the biggest thing. I used to be hugely politically active. I volunteered for Obama's campaign for months at a time on several occasions. I used to be really big into political activism, and I got that from my father. My father was very much into politics. It came to a point where I couldn't watch it anymore. I couldn't experience it anymore. There was nothing about it that was uplifting for me, and I had to let it go. I'm a really big fan of psychological thrillers and zombie movies and vampire films and all kinds of supernatural type things like that. And I got to a point where I couldn't watch anything that had any sort of violence anymore. Anything that was super gory or that had a lot of killing, anything like that, it really affected me in a way that was visceral. And I had to stop watching it. One show in particular, I remember watching an episode of The Walking Dead, and I was super big into that show, and I felt absolutely hideously awful after watching this one episode. I never watched the show again. And it was literally in the middle of a season, and I couldn't do it anymore. And these are some of the changes that can be really difficult because, these are all things that you as a person have decided that this is part of who I am. I like these types of things. And those tastes are going to change when you are going through this process. Now, is it permanent? Not necessarily. Obviously, when you are in the beginning of your awakening, more towards the middle of your awakening, you are going to be much more sensitive to the energies. You are going to be much more sensitive to these types of harsh forms of duality. Now that I've been through it and I don't want to say entirely out the other side, but I am sort of more on the tail end of my spiritual awakening, I can actually start to handle a little bit more. Now, I have chosen not to watch super violent things. I have chosen to continue not to watch the news. I will read the news just to get the information that I need, but that way I can be very particular about what I'm reading and what I'm ingesting into my auric field, my physical field, my energetic field. I want you to be really kind to yourself in regards to these types of changes. This can also include food. You might have reactions now to foods that you used to be able to eat all the time. I went through this several times over the course of my awakening where I couldn't eat meat anymore, or I couldn't eat anything that had dairy. I had reactions to alcohol in which I never had before. Any sort of new allergies or new intolerances to food or substances, that is also going to be part of this awakening process because your body is telling you that it needs to prepare to hold that higher level of energy. And if you are ingesting low vibrational things, and that's going to be different for absolutely everyone. If you are ingesting those things, your body is going to start rejecting them. Okay, so you're going through all of these changes. You are in this puddle of what is happening to my life. And you might be asking yourself, what is the purpose of all of this? Why do I have to go through this in order to have this bliss and this joy and this unconditional love? And the reason is because you need to get rid of all of those belief systems, all of that hurt, all of the anger, all of the pain, everything that you ever suppressed over the course of your lifetime, and also sometimes from previous lifetimes. And you need to let those go. What this looks like when you are bringing up emotions and belief systems that you have suppressed, they have to come back up to the surface. So you do have to experience them again. You have to see them again, and you have to integrate them. What it means to integrate this is to acknowledge it, to say, you know what, I see you, I understand, and I'm sorry that I've suppressed this emotion. I am here to feel it. I am here to express it. and I am here to let it go. That is the purpose. It is to let go of these things because we hold on to pain, we hold on to hurt, we hold on to fears, and we don't even realize that we're doing it. Throughout the course of my awakening process, there were so many fears that came up for me. I started becoming afraid of so many things, and I didn't understand why, because I had these fears when I was younger or when I was, a child, and all of a sudden these fears were coming up again. And I'm like, why on earth am I all of a sudden afraid of this again? And the reason is because it needed to be seen again, and I needed to see it for what it truly is. Because once you face these fears, you face these emotions, you face this pain, you will see that it will not break you, that it does not define you, and it is no longer needed. And when you are able to let these things go, that is when the universe is going to be able to bring to you that beautiful life that you are trying to manifest, that best life that you are trying to live. And that is why the crumbling wall, all of these things are so very important for the process of this awakening journey. This is also very necessary to be able to start awakening your psychic gifts, to start really stepping into the flow of your life for manifestation. Because you don't want to step into that flow of manifestation energy if you are still anchored in the past and in your pain, in your fear, because then you're going to start just manifesting more of that. And that's how you end up in those cycles that perpetuate over and over again. In order for you to step out of those cycles, these things need to happen. And like I said, it happens differently for everyone. So I don't want you to take on anything that isn't yours. I want you to think about the things that you have had in your life in the past that have fallen away, and look at the trajectory of what has happened since. I can almost guarantee that most of the time, things have changed for the better eventually. We will be right back with The Heart of You after a word from our sponsors. Welcome back to The Heart of You on Paris Underground Radio. The last thing I want to say is, when you are going through this process, make sure you are still focusing on the present moment. One thing I went through a lot was to try to project into the future what I wanted. And I got really focused on exactly what I wanted my life to be and how I could see it happening. And when it didn't turn out that way, or when the things that I wanted weren't coming to me, it caused more pain and more suffering. And it was completely unnecessary. If I would have just focused on my current space that I was in, if I just focused on my healing journey and what I needed to do for myself and heal within myself, I would have been much more open to what the universe was presenting to me on a day-to-day basis that was beautiful and that would have brought me joy. But because I was expecting something different, or I was expecting a particular outcome, it didn't bring me joy, and it just brought more suffering. So living in the present moment is super, super important when it comes to this journey and it comes to dealing with these emotions, because knowing that from one moment to the next, things can change. You can ride these energies, and sometimes they can be turbulent. Sometimes they're super smooth and really beautiful and amazing. But just know that the one constant is always change. Have an amazing day, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Please feel free to visit parisundergroundradio.com for more wonderful Parisian-centric podcasts. If you would like a spiritual guidance session with me to work through your spiritual awakening, please visit my website at www.infinitesoullove.com.